Roxane Gay, who talks about the confessions of a bad feminist. So this is where we're going to begin.
I am failing as a woman. I am failing as a feminist. I have passionate opinions about gender equality, but I worry that to freely accept the label of feminist would not be fair to good feminists. I'm a feminist, but I'm a rather bad one. Oh, so I call myself a bad feminist. Or at least I wrote an essay, and then I wrote a book called Bad Feminist, and then in interviews people started calling me the bad feminist. So, what started as a bit of an inside joke with myself and a willful provocation has become a thing. Let me take a step back. When I was younger, mostly in my teens and 20s, I had strange ideas about feminists as hairy, angry, man-hating, sex-hating women, as if those are bad things. These days, I look at how women are treated the world over, and anger in particular seems like a perfectly reasonable response. But back then, I worried about the tone people used when suggesting I might be a feminist. The feminist label was an accusation. It was an F word and not a nice one. I was labeled a woman who doesn't play by the rules, who expects too much, who thinks far too highly of myself by daring to believe I am equal, superior to a man. You don't want to be that rebel woman until you realize that you very much are that woman and cannot imagine being anyone else. As I got older, I began to accept that I am indeed a feminist and a proud one. I hold certain truths to be self-evident. Women are equal to men. We deserve equal pay for equal work. We have the right to move through the world as we choose, free from harassment or violence. We have the right to easy, affordable access to birth control and reproductive services. We have the right to make choices about our bodies free from legislative oversight or evangelical doctrine. We have the right to respect. There's more. When we talk about the needs of women, we have to consider the other identities we inhabit. We are not just women. We are people with different bodies, gender expressions, faiths, sexualities, class backgrounds, abilities, and so much more. We need to take into account these differences and how they affect us as much as we account for what we have in common. Without this kind of inclusion, our feminism is nothing. I hold these truths to be self-evident, but let me be clear. I'm a mess. I am full of contradictions. There are many ways in which I'm doing feminism wrong. I have another confession. When I drive to work, I listen to thuggish rap at a very loud volume. Even though the lyrics are degrading to women, these lyrics offend me to my core. The classic Yin Yang Twins song, Salt Shaker, it is amazing. Make it work with your wet t-shirt, bitch, you gotta shake it till your camel starts to hurt. Think about it. Poetry, right? I am utterly mortified by my music choices. I firmly believe in man work, which is anything I don't want to do, including all domestic tasks, but also bug killing, trash removal, lawn care, and vehicle maintenance. I want no part of any of that. Pink is my favorite color. I enjoy fashion magazines and pretty things. I watch The Bachelor and romantic comedies, and I have absurd fantasies about fairy tales coming true. Some of my transgressions are more flagrant. If a woman wants to take her husband's name, that is her choice, and it is not my place to judge. If a woman chooses to stay home to raise her children, I embrace that choice too. The problem is not that she makes herself economically vulnerable in that choice. The problem is that our society is set up to make women economically vulnerable when they choose. Let's deal with that. I reject the mainstream feminism that has historically ignored or deflected the needs of women of color, working class women, queer women, and transgender women in favor of supporting white, middle, and upper class straight women. Listen, if that's good feminism, I am a very bad feminist. There's also this. As a feminist, I feel a lot of pressure. We have this tendency to put visible feminists on a pedestal. We expect them to pose perfectly. When they disappoint us, we gleefully knock them from the very pedestal we put them on. Like I said, I am a mess. Consider me knocked off that pedestal before you ever try to put me up there. Too many women, particularly groundbreaking women and industry leaders, are afraid to be labeled as feminists. They're afraid to stand up and say, yes, I am a feminist, for fear of what that label means, for fear of being unable to live up to unrealistic expectations. Take, for example, Beyonce, or as I call her, the goddess. She has emerged in recent years as a visible feminist. At the 2014 MTV Video Music Awards, she performed in front of the word feminist 10 feet high. It was a glorious spectacle to see this pop star openly embracing feminism and letting young women and men know that being a feminist is something to celebrate. As the moment faded, cultural critics began endlessly debating whether or not Beyonce was indeed a feminist. They graded her feminism instead of simply taking a grown, accomplished woman at her word. We demand perfection from feminists because we are still fighting for so much, we want so much, we need so damn much. We go far beyond reasonable constructive criticism to dissecting any given woman's feminism, tearing it apart until there's nothing left. We do not need to do that. Bad feminism, or really more inclusive feminism, is a starting point, but what happens next? We go from acknowledging our imperfections to accountability, or walking the walk and being a little bit brave. If I listen to degrading music, I am creating a demand for which artists are more than happy to contribute a limitless supply. These artists are not going to change how they talk about women in their songs until we demand that change by affecting their bottom line. Certainly, it is difficult. Why must it be so catchy? It's hard to make the better choice, and it is so easy to justify a lesser one. But when I justify bad choices, I make it harder for women to achieve equality, the equality that we all deserve, and I need to own that. I think of my nieces, ages 3 and 4. They are gorgeous and headstrong, brilliant girls who are a whole lot of brave. I want them to thrive in a world where they are valued for the powerful creatures they are. I think of them, and suddenly the better choice becomes far easier to make. We can all make better choices. We can change the channel when a television show treats sexual violence against women like sport, Game of Thrones. We can change the radio station when we hear songs that treat women as nothing. We can spend our box office dollars elsewhere when movies don't treat women as anything more than decorative objects. We can stop supporting professional sports where the athletes treat their partners like punching bags. In other ways, men, and especially straight white men, can say, no, I will not publish with your magazine or participate in your project or otherwise work with you until you include a fair number of women, both as participants and decision makers. I won't work with you until your publication or your organization is more inclusive of all kinds of difference. Those of us who are underrepresented and invited to participate in such projects can also decline to be included until more of us are invited through the glass ceiling and we are tokens no more. Without these efforts, without taking these stands, our accomplishments are going to mean very little. We can commit these small acts of bravery and hope that our choices trickle upward to the people in power: editors, movie and music producers, CEOs, lawmakers, the people who can make bigger, braver choices to create lasting, meaningful change. We can also boldly claim our feminism, good, bad, or anywhere in between. The last line of my book, Bad Feminist, says, I would rather be a bad feminist than no feminist at all. This is true for so many reasons, but first and foremost, I say this because once upon a time, my voice was stolen from me, and feminism helped me to get my voice back. There was an incident. I call it an incident so I can carry the burden of what happened. Some boys broke me when I was so young I did not know what boys can do to break a girl. They treated me like I was nothing. I began to believe I was nothing. They stole my voice, and in the after I did not dare to believe that anything I might say could matter. But I had writing, and there I wrote myself back together. I wrote myself toward a stronger version of myself. I read the words of women who might understand a story like mine, and women who looked like me and understood what it was like to move through the world with brown skin. I read the words of women who showed me I was not nothing. I learned to write like them, and then I learned to write as myself. I found my voice again, and I started to believe that my voice is powerful beyond measure. Through writing and feminism, I also found that if I was a little bit brave, another woman might hear me and see me and recognize that none of us are the nothing the world tries to tell us we are. In one hand, I hold the power to accomplish anything, and in my other, I hold the humbling reality that I am just one woman. I am a bad feminist. I am a good woman. I am trying to become better in how I think and what I say and what I do without abandoning everything that makes me human. I hope that we can all do the same. I hope that we can all be a little bit brave when we most need such bravery.
Alright, so that was Roxane Gay's Confession of a Bad Feminism. Thoughts?
It is absolutely true. The thing about it is, when as a woman, you first of all start out, yay, girl power, and you identify as a strong woman, that very connotation has social ramifications. Because as a strong woman, then the patriarchal thought is you don't need a man. The thought is you are one of the super women, and you're not to be touched. You're intimidating. You are this, you are that. So all kinds of things come with that. And I love this piece because it recognizes not only the situations and the circumstances that are present in society, but it also recognizes who she is. And I'm enough. I'm okay with who I am in this. And it's a call to social change.
I agree, and it really brought back for me one of the tenets of critical feminism in terms of changing the social structure. She talked about people in the minority breaking through the glass ceiling and not being the exception to the rule, which is one of the things that critical feminism talks about, is actually a society where gender equality is the norm. And so it's not this notion of, and I love the whole, black girl magic, black girls rock, all of that, but at the same time, the message is that these women, the hashtag black girl magic always accompanies a black woman doing something that apparently people don't think that black women or black girls could do.
Right.
And so again, a society where those things become the norm, then you no longer have a need for the hashtag black girl magic, because it's an everyday thing.
And I think that we picked up on it last time in class that Roxane Gay brings up this anti-essentialism type perspective that feminism is not just this one, it's like this one piece, that there's all these different types of pieces to being a feminist. And I think what Roxane Gay is getting at is that if we talk about feminism as this white perspective of this white female and this white unequal pay, or what are the sameness feminists or difference feminists or however they see themselves, is like we neglect a whole other part of black women as well too. So I think that's important to bring up. Any other thoughts on Roxane Gay?
I really like how she draws attention to this dually problematic perspective that certain things have to be all or nothing, right? So like on the one hand, a little preview for my presentation, you have this conception of racism that's really dialed up to 100 to absolve casual racism, right? Because you're not declining. But on the other hand, to be a good feminist means you have to be a perfect feminist.
Right.
And it really is then used to undercut and say, well, you can't be a feminist. What about the time you did this?
Right. Or the trashy music you listen to.
Yeah.
Or the things you don't like to do that you want men to do.
Yeah. So
Right.
all your views are invalid.
Right.
I am struggling through the end because she says something that I think is important. She says, may we all have a little bit of bravery when we need to be brave. And thinking through where are the spaces that I can be brave and fight for specifically women who are mostly marginalized already. And I think I'm struggling through that because as someone who already is marginalized myself, I think about, am I even in a position, do I become brave and then lose what little I have? Not, well, I'll stop there. I'm thinking through that, through your presentation.
Any other final thoughts on Roxanne? Awesome. So I kind of went backwards, just so you know. I kind of jumped straight into the TED Talk. I thought it was a good transition from talking about critical feminism to kind of Roxanne Gay's perspective on the bad feminist and what it means to be a bad feminist. And so we are going to do some overviews of some readings that we did in class. I've cut them a little bit short. Any questions as I go through it, please feel free to stop me. If we have time, we're going to do an interactive activity on the Untold Story of Black Girls, which is in front of you, or I can email it to you and you're more than welcome to read it. It connects the Untold Story of Black Girls in education, starting with the video of the Facebook viral video of the girl getting, the black girl being thrown out of the classroom by a white police officer, and then it goes in to talk about how the black girl's voices are silenced, and what she was doing was showing respect because she was staying silent in the situation, which we'll talk about in our readings today. Okay?
So she says it here, but you're going to have until about 10:45.
Okay. I'll do my best. Just tell me to stop. So one of the first readings that we read was Our People's Daughters, Critical Race, Feminism, and Black Girls Education. This was a scholarship on the educational needs of black girls, which have fallen through the cracks. Fordham suggested that students and school officials alike have stereotyped African American girls as loud, aggressive, and masculine. Many have embraced a loud and tough persona in order to be heard and not overlooked in the classroom and the school buildings that tend to ignore and marginalize them as students. A raceless persona is the absence of a behavioral and attitudinal characteristic related to a particular race. And Fordham claims have suggested that black achieving students do well because they reject and ascribe black identity. Carla O'Connor here says, contrary to Fordham, she concluded that academically resilient black girls are socialized to have strong sense of racial identification and commitment to fighting against race, class, and gender injustices at school, in the community, and societies overall. Annette Henry says black girls have a dual persona that leads to resilience inside and outside of the classrooms. They use two things: silence as a strategy for getting ahead in class, and then a talking back perspective to speak out against classroom discourse and practices that were not in the girls' best interest. So here you have two different perspectives. Either they stay silent or they're lashing out and they're talking back practices. So this author chooses these researches because they are topics that are more focused on resilience versus a deficit perspective, or a deficit-oriented research perspective. Evans Winters says that black girls are left to fend for themselves. That was awkward. My bad. And it's on silent. How does that work? Black girls are left to fend for themselves in desegregated public, urban, and private schools, in classrooms, more than likely with white female middle-class teachers from family and economic background differences from their own. And so this came up, and I thought this was important. It says, what interests do the white middle class have in meeting the needs of black female students? From an interest convergence perspective, where do the needs of whites and males intersect with the needs of African American female students? Oh yeah, no, I was just stopping for a moment for you to think about it. Do you want to answer it though? You can answer it. Anybody have a perspective on this? Where does the interest of white middle class have in meeting the needs of black female students? So from an interest convergence theory perspective, where do the needs of whites and males intersect with the needs of African American female students?
I have a thought, but it might be controversial.
Is it that it doesn't? Tell me what is it?
So, in the white family, the white man runs the family, and the black family, the black woman runs the family. And this is not just an American thing, something in the United States. This is from my experiences on the African continent. That even if it looked like men ran the house, women made all of the decisions, like what's for dinner, where our kids going to school, where we're going to live. That was a very black woman-run thing on the continent. And so I think as both heads of household, and I say that not by income, but by decision-making authority, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Who has the power in the house, right?
Right.
Decision-making power.
And I didn't really
At a house.
understand that. Right.
Yeah.
Until I got older, when someone was like, oh no, this is how houses are run.
I totally agree, and I kind of see a historical lineage of this, that it has interested white middle class in neutralizing the black family, and in particular black men, to promote and empower black women, but to the detriment of saying that if you have a black man around, I will take this away from you. So we look at the closing of the civil rights movement, which totally exhausted America. It totally exhausted white America. The best way to neutralize that was through the Johnson era, was through offering aid to women who were single, on the caveat, I'm going to inspect your house. And if I find evidence that a man is in there, I'm going to remove aid. So now what we've done is create a situation where I can do it without you.
Or I have to.
I have to do it without you. It's almost biblical.
Right.
Kill all the males. Preserve the female. Turn this thing upside down. In a patriarchal society, to create a matriarchal society within it is contrary to the way the economy's ran. So that is how I see it. And I say it's a bit controversial because I know that it comes from kind of a traditionalist male, pro-male idea, although we're talking about feminism, that it's kind of tough to hear. But I think to some degree, we create a society where to destroy the black male, we have to promote black female. And it's disheartening when I hear it in the language of black females. That I don't need you for S. I don't need you. You can get on. I can do it all on my own.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the mama and the daddy. Every father says that kind of discourse is so detrimental, even if it's true.
Right. It's still detrimental.
Yes, because we've seen at least 3 decades of it where it has not worked out. You being mama and daddy has created this kid you can't control. So now the court's got to control it. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I got.
No, you know, it's interesting because now I'm trying to think about financially where it lies, because despite the fact that black women, if you could separate by race and gender, black women are the most educated subpopulation in the country. And it's not even close. Like, they're beating everybody else to sleep. Yet the second lowest paid. And I don't know, I guess it would have been in Rhonda's presentation where we were just talking about high school principals, and I think that's a broader issue that we have, right? That women typically, it's not just, one of the things that accounts for our salary gap is that we hire women into lower positions. Like, so I'll hire you as a teacher, but not as a principal, which the pay gap, right? Like, we're talking about
2 people,
right?
And so when you think about that, I think about what interest that might coincide with this interest to promote the black woman, knowing that she would not receive the same pay because of both race and gender,
Right.
Thus creating a crushing sub-economy within black households.
And if you think about the numbers, particularly population statistics, I think it's the average age of black person is remarkably younger than the average age of a white person. And a larger, I think 32% of black America is 19 and under. Now, take that understanding with this understanding of the single black female raising children. So you have dependents, less salary, but more dependents that you're responsible for.
Yep.
You can't get ahead.
Yeah.
You know, you can't
always
survive.
behind. Right.
And if you're gonna go to college, you're gonna go on a loan. So now we've saddled you with debt, high levels of dependency, and of course I'm speaking in generalities because we also know that the more educated, the less children you're probably gonna have. But we're speaking on that, and then put the layer of history in it. Marriage. For many years, marriage was a way for a woman to escape her daddy's farm to go to her husband's farm. So college education is your way to be independent. Whereas white women went to college to meet a husband to get a business. Black women went to college to get off the farm and get a life that I can control. So it's almost like we're punishing economically women for doing what they're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. Great. So
You asked.
that was deep. Loved it. Critical race feminism may provide legal and academic strategium, just like Rhonda had mentioned, for studying and eradicating race, class, and gender oppression in educational institutions. Critical race theory, though, was dominated by men's experiences, excluding the perspective of women of color. So that's kind of how you have the emergence of the critical race feminism. So there are a couple of benefits to investigating the theory and education issues impacting the girls. There's a couple of ways here that are listed in this article, which I thought are really important. Critical race feminism as a theoretical lens and movement purports that women of color's experiences, thus perspectives, are different from the experiences of men of color and those of white women. Critical race feminism focuses on the lives of women of color who face multiple forms of discrimination due to the intersections of race, class, and gender within a system of white male patriarchy and a racist oppression. Critical race feminism asserts that multiple identities and consciousness of women of color, anti-essentialists, which Adrienne Wing talks about more in her article coming up. Critical race feminism is multidisciplinary in scope and breadth, and critical race feminism calls for theories and practices that simultaneously study and combat gender and racial oppression. So Harris in 1997 explains gender essentialism as the notion that there is this monolithic woman's experience regardless of one's race, class, or sexual identification. Racial essentialism is the term used to describe the idea that members of a racial ethnic group are all the same. And so there comes up this theory of multiple consciousness by Wing, which means multiple roles, relationships, and identities within that same female. And then through critical race feminism lens, the author calls attention to the following realities of the states of black girls' education. So these are all the realities that they offer in the article, that girls of African descent are at the bottom of the social totem pole in society. Thus, there is an urgent need for a theoretical framework that serves to expose, confront, and eradicate race, class, gender oppression in families, communities, and schools. Currently, there's not enough being done by scholars in the field of education on the policy pedagogically to unabashedly develop and implement classroom practices and curriculum that directly relate to the needs of black girls. In the postmodern era, black girls' psyches and bodies are being subjected to subjugation in the media, just like Rhonda talked about in critical feminism. Racist and sexist school policies that serve to exclude and silence black girls. Melody brought up we brought up the whole uniform policy. And social and legal policies that dehumanize rather than foster the quality of life for many low-income, working-class young women. Young women's existence at the margins presents both constraints and possibilities for all educational reform efforts and overall societal transformation. Therefore, research with and on behalf of black girls benefits the society as a whole. And critical race feminism in education offers the most nuanced and straightforward framework for contending with social, economic, political, and educational problems confronting black female students inside and outside of the schools. So that was kind of the article overview of Our People's Daughters. The next article was Not the Color Purple, Black Feminist Lessons for Educational Care. So it adds this proponent of the theory of ethics of care. Racial innocence as narrative supports sentimental belief that being natural means not noticing racial differences. What looks to whites like charming innocence may look to people of color like privilege and ignorance. There's no such thing as racial innocence, there's only racial responsibility or irresponsibility. And then there's this notion of color talk. By suppressing color talk, which is the recognition that someone is white, black, or brown. The white mother chooses to avoid rather than identify the racism that treats blackness and brownness as unmentionable. So there's two problems here with colorblindness that are mentioned. One, it fails to consider black experiences in terms of distinctly African American cultural values, historical achievements, or social experiences, and it treats racism as something that can be eradicated simply by ignoring it. So theories of care fail to acknowledge and address the whiteness of their political and cultural assumptions. They are colorblind. They generalize. Most of the mainstream ethics of care literature assume that the work of caring requires retreating from society to a space of innocence. There's these liberal theories that tend to address social issues such as race, gender, and equality as problems to be solved by effecting more sensitive adjustments of institutions to individuals and groups. And then there's objections that leftists have raised to ethics of care. There's an inadequate attention given to issues of power within care and relationships. There's this deficit assumption informing educational theories of care that have offer to provide children of color with the kind of support supposedly not found in their homes. There's this apparent essentialism in theorists of an ethic of care of women in general, and there's this disregard for political oppressive functions to which caring has been put, as well as the unacknowledgeable support it may require from a working class woman. So then Thompson gets into caring theories and colorblindness and how they fail to register the whiteness of the problems of situations which caring is enlisted as a response. So there's troubles with the ideals set forth in mainstream literature on caring. It's one, because they're ideals, and then two, the ideals described are by no means universal to every single woman. Most of the research generated by white theorists of care have worked within a framework limited by the theorists' own distinctive cultural class assumptions, and by information largely from white, middle, and upper class respondents. So then Thompson goes on to talk about the four themes identified in Gilligan's In a Different Voice. I spelled that wrong, my apologies. One was the moral relevance of the situation. She says that in order to develop an ethical code predicted in on their own dignity, survival, and self-respect, blacks had to have disregarded and overtly challenged dominant codes of ethics. There's this tradition of other mothering, which was a way of sustaining an adult community relationship. The second theme was a pragmatic orientation towards survival. One of the tasks of the black family was to prepare children to cope with, to face racism with resilience. Black feminist orientation to caring does not borrow from white feminine ideals, but must be understood in relation to an overarching ethic of responsibility to family, to church, and to community. There's this black standpoint theme, which uses Alice Walker's womanism based on the everyday experiences of black women. And then the last was a power of moral narrative. There's two types of truth-telling. One was a communal truth-telling, shared an understanding of the ways things are, and then there's this literary storytelling, which teaches the reader and listener how to read and how to see or hear it, but does not show things as literal truths, but calls upon the reader to engage in the process of meaning-making and interpretation. And then black narratives have also played a crucial role in shaping the distinctive black consciousness, because they're more likely to focus on black community, the human relationships within that community as well. And then lastly, there's these 5 dimensions of school practices that need to change from black female ethics, feminist ethics, and epistemology if they were to be taken seriously. The first one is that Thompson calls that teachers need to show their students respect by knowing about and understanding students' different types of situations. Teachers need to help students develop strategies for survival, code switching. I don't know if I agree with that. I think code switching is something that is, I work in an all-male school, all boys, but code switching, we bring it up a lot at my school because language like bruh, cuz, things like that are brought into schools that might be said in things like homes, but from an administrative type perspective, they take that as unprofessional language. And from my perspective, that is just type of language that students speak with at home. So I think we have to come from an understanding that how students speak at home and how that might influence the way they speak in school is something that we need to acknowledge and not give consequences for things like that. I think that we just need to kind of help bring them back to the reality of the professional setting that we're in and things like that. So she brings up code switching. The classroom must be a place in which the various standpoints of people of color are treated with respect. Teachers and students need to become versed in a variety of cultural narratives. And then teachers and students alike need to embrace inquiry stance, such as inquiry supported in new views that are explored. and considered. So there's two readings that explored a female voice, or bringing up critical race in the use of female voice. And the first one was on Muslim women in France and the headscarf ban by Wing and Smith. So I'm going to go through these, and then I'm going to go through them quickly. And then if we have any questions after all to wrap it up, we'll do that because I think we're running out of time. So in 2004, France passed a law that forbids the wearing of ostentatious religious symbols in public schools and a historical commitment to secularism. Last said is, I guess, the French word. The article uses critical race feminism as a lens to literally lift the veil of ignorance and misunderstanding of the law and its effect on young Muslim women. Mary Matusada, I'm going to say Mary, Miss Mary, Dr. Mary, uses this multiple consciousness perspective, which is an oppression as a result of both race, ethnicity, and gender. Yes?
Mari Masuda.
Mari Masuda. Masuda, thank you. Dr. Masuda.
Okay. Just a lawyer. So.
Just a lawyer. Okay.
Well, no, because doctor typically means, never mind.
So, Masuda uses the multiple consciousness perspective, which talks about the oppression from race, ethnicity, and gender. Wing here talks about that it includes all of those, right? But also consciously and unconsciously, there's religion, class, disability, sexual orientation, nationality, language, age, marital status, parental status, and your political leaders that are also forms of oppression as well. So in this article, they use a world traveling perspective, which provides in which many ways that we as Americans can see ourselves historically on the issue. We see ourselves as the other might see us, and then see the other within her own context. So the background here quickly is that the headscarf in Islam points to the Quran as the source of God's command. The headscarf shields the female body from the views of strange men, and that women who follow the prophet will easily be recognized and not degraded, an offense to Muhammad. Muslim population was alienated from the rest of French society. They were eliminated, isolated and limited in educational opportunities. Life was in urban ghettos. In 1989, you had the headscarf affair, which included 3 students in Paris wearing their headscarves to class, which did not go over very well. There was a formal separation in 1905 formal separation in 1905 is a way to protect schools from religious interference. This separation was from religion to schools. And then they believed that there was this French identity before any other identity. You were French before you were a Muslim. So the headscarf was not originally banned, but escalated on February 10th to be completely banned in a vote from 494 to 36 in favor of banning conspicuous religious symbols from public schools. Human Rights Watch said this is infringing on the internationally recognized freedoms of religion, and the United Nations says this is intolerant towards Muslims. Ardizoni argues that the absence of women's voices and presence supports a patriarchal discourse, enforcing dual or binary perspectives. There were some arguments that women were in favor for wearing headscarves, and this because it gave them a personal religious conviction. It gave them freedom of their own religion, acceptance as a good Muslim female, compliance with family values. There was this neutralization of sexuality and protection from harassment of Muslim males, and individual choice and religious cultural identities. There were some that had arguments against the headscarf. Some women said that it's a symbol of oppression and not free choice. They argued that it's sexist, it fosters extremism, and it separates the Muslim women. So then she goes in to argue some proposals for the future. But I'm going to move forward to Black women in gangs. So the last article here is on critical weight of race, feminism, blacks, women, and gangs. So this article attempts to demarginalize the experience of women, African American women in particular, and bring to the fore the importance of black women's relationship to gangs. So here it focuses on the African American female and the social reality in which that she lives. Black women's involvement in gangs can be conceptualized in 6 different ways here. Black women belong to all female gangs with their own set of rules. Black women serve as female auxiliaries to male gangs. Black women are members of sexually integrated gangs where male and female gang members belong to the same group and participate jointly in many activities, including criminal activities. Black women are the girlfriends and wives of gang members, and black women Maybe it would be the mothers of male gang members, child or children, and black women as mothers, sisters, and daughters have familial relationships with gang members. Females participated in 3 different types of gangs. There was independent, autonomous female gangs. There was female auxiliary groups, which was the most common, where they were in the same gangs as men. And then there were sexually integrated gangs. So critical theoretical explanations of juvenile gang involvement have mainly focused on males. This article focuses on black females. Cohen says gangs give youth a coping mechanism to deal with humiliation, frustration, hostility towards the middle class, which arise from an inability to access the middle class and gain success status. Miller says gangs is a normal aspect of lower class life. Wilson says unemployment, poverty, and some cases of racial and gender oppression are the basis for the problem in poverty-stricken black communities and result in what has been termed as underclass. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will go through here and say that there were 5 strategies for gang intervention here that they proposed, and one of them was suppression, which we know doesn't really work. Social intervention, social opportunities, community mobilization, organizational development, and or change. So, I think I'm going to stop there.
How long is the video from Dr. Cooper?
Like 3 minutes, you want to watch it?
Let's do that and then do a little bit of discussion and then we'll break.
Questions of race and power are obviously not limited to the movies. In tonight's Brief but Spectacular, we hear from cultural theorist, author, and professor Brittany Cooper. She calls on us to look at the past during this Black History Month and recognize change should not always be gradual. Cooper recently came out with a new book, Eloquent Rage. A black feminist discovers her superpower.
I'm a black feminist, capital B, capital F. I'm unapologetically black and I'm unapologetically a feminist. And look, depending on what circles you're in, it's hard to be both those things at the same time. But I think that being both those things is the thing that will save us. If time had a race, it would be white. White people feel like they own time and control history. And there's a way that, even if you go back to the early Western philosophers that everybody loves, my least favorite is George Hegel, who said, Africa is no historic part of the world. So in the 1700s and 1800s, various groups of white European men got together and just decided that Africa didn't matter in the span of world history. I mean, talk about having some cojones. Time has a history, and so do black people. And part of the reason that we have, for instance, Black History Month in this country is because we literally have to make the argument that black people have actually done things that are significant to the creation of the nation state. And it turns out that if we didn't have things like Black History Month, apparently people would not believe that black people were actually significant historical actors. We keep on relitigating basically the 1860s in this country. We have racial animus, the likes of which we have not seen in my lifetime, a resurgence of law enforcement engaging black folks in ways that are often deadly and often with impunity. White people dictate the pace of social inclusion, and they do so by saying, we'll get there. Why are you trying to push us so fast? That kind of pushing back the clock, which is a phrase that we use all the time, is a way in which those in power like to say to those of us who don't have power, we're going to determine not only what you get, but when you get it. And that is the critical difference between young activists who are in the streets saying, change it now, change it today. We don't want your gradualism. They remind me of the debates over slavery in this country and ending slavery in the 1800s. There were gradualists who said, we want to end slavery, but we want to do it in steps. So we'll free you, but can you work 2 years? Can we sort of gradually fade you out of slavery? And there were others who said, we're going to pass this amendment, and at that moment, you will be free. And for those of us who continue to struggle with a white supremacist, hacktivist, patriarchal power structure, immediate freedom is what we want. Gradualism does not serve us. There is a truth-telling that happens at that nexus of blackness and feminism, at that space of having to work twice as hard to get half as far, which is a black proverb, and at that space of knowing that so often you can be the dopest chick in the room and they'll give it to the mediocre white man in the room. Putting those things together gives you a clarity and a vision about where we can go if we stop oppressing black folks and women and gender non-conforming folks. And so black feminism taught me that, and I think it can teach you that too. I am Brittany Cooper, and this is my brief but spectacular take on my eloquent rage.
And you can watch additional brief but spectacular episodes.
All right, thoughts? Brittany Cooper, Dr. Brittany Cooper.
For whatever it's worth, Sharon Davenport cited her 4 times in her dissertation.
Well, that's all I got.
She's the dumbest chick.
I'm glad I found her.
I think she's right, but I think right for black feminists, but I think right for all people at the intersection of marginalized identities. There's some truth telling, that you don't get until, so I recently made a comment on Twitter about black women having a superpower, and someone's response was, that's patriarchal too. And I was like, well, no, it's not the superpower is natural, but it's a superpower that's formed out of being at the intersection of marginalized communities, right? Whenever you have intense marginalization, you learn to deal with it in ways that seem like a superpower. So to that extent, all of us who have those multiple marginalizations will learn one way or another to have a superpower. So I think I agree with Dr. Cooper in that, but I do question whether that's something that happens for all of us who are at multiple intersections.
I hear that, and I still go back to this idea of it's a natural thing that has to happen. You learn how to adjust and survive and do what you have to do. But I think while the world sits and marvels at our superpowers, it further convinces them not to act anymore. Because I don't have to change the structure if you're doing quite well in spite of. And it's how we look at schools. Like, if we put it bar for bar and remove inequities, black kids are doing pretty well in schools.
Doing better.
But that's no reason to ignore that there's structural things that need to get done.
Correct.
The fact that we learn how to take a little bit and make something out of it doesn't resolve the responsibility of our structures and institutions of their job to right the wrong. And I think sometimes it gets clouded in black girl magic and the year of the woman and all of these things. It's like, okay, cool, y'all are good. Leave you alone and go back to making this money. And that becomes problematic. And also, I think by tying black girl magic to money making, you're buying into capitalism. So we only aspire black girl magic to Cardi, Beyonce, and whomever else is making money. And as the boys would say, we made money making the object of manhood. We can make wage earners, but not necessarily men. So character is not developed if we're about making money.
I don't think I disagree with that. I was going to say you said something recently though that I wanted to hop on this idea. And I'm trying to think. You said it was right before you wrapped up. It'll come back and I'll talk to you.
I'm done.
Oh, you're done?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take